Is there any preferred channel to use on GMRS or amateur radio for emergency communications? Well, of course there is. Assume that you have an FRS walkie-talkie. We're talking one like this, half a watt or a quarter of a watt usually. One of the main things that you're going to want to do is just stay on channel 1. Even though channel 1 on GMRS is only a 5 watt maximum, it'll be the main channel that people listen to if you're going to be making call-outs. I know it sounds silly that you're just going to have the main channel being number 1, but assume you turn on an FRS or GMRS radio, it'll be the first channel you see, and therefore many times is used as the emergency channel. Now this isn't the same across the board for everybody, so let's go to a different one. Now assume you're using a GMRS radio. Well, whenever you go to turn on your GMRS radio, remember that what you can do is set up the repeaters in your area. When you set the repeaters up in your area, you are now increasing your distance from about a mile all the way up to possibly 100 miles. And that'll be just whatever channel that repeater in that area is on. In Cincinnati, where I'm based out of, there's a repeater for every single channel that has a repeater channel. Of course, you're going to want to set these up before you actually go out anywhere, as being able to find the repeater's tone is near impossible without wasting all of your battery trying to find how to access the repeater. Well, what about amateur radio instead of GMRS? I mean, there's the more technical side of things. What if that's all you have and your phone has no service? With amateur radio, there is generally 2 non-repeater frequencies that people use for simplex communications. One on VHF and one on UHF. The VHF is the most common one, sitting at 146.52 megahertz. When doing this, turn your tone mode not into TX and RX, or even RX, but simply just TX with a tone of 141.3, or even 123. Those are the 2 most common tones associated with simplex or even just amateur communications in general. But how are you going to know if anybody heard you, or how can you make sure somebody does hear you? Well, there's roughly 2 ways for you to increase your distance, with one being a little bit more important than the other. Number 1 being height. 2 people standing with a hill in the way may have a hard time communicating with each other. But if you or your antenna is higher up, then you may be able to see your person. And this can be taken to extreme lengths. The higher up you are, the further you're going to talk. You can change your distance from 1 mile up to 100 miles simply just by getting higher up. Number 2 being power. The GMRS legal limit for handhelds is 5 watts and mobiles is 50 watts. You won't find too much of a difference between these two, and that's for whenever you are seriously in some brush and you need that little bit of extra power and able to push you out there. And when it comes to amateur radio, handhelds, I can't seem to find any legal limit, and bass and mobiles, you can have up to 1500 watts even with a technician's license. 1500 watts is obviously going to be excessive, and you're going to need a lot of power to be able to run that. So in a real life situation, assuming it's hooked up to your car, the most you're going to get is about 100 watts. Just to go back to the original point, if you are on GMRS, then you're going to want to go to GMRS channel 1 or the repeater channels. Or if you're on amateur radio, then you're going to want to go to 146.52 or 446.000.